Hola. Arrancamos, ¿no? Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por estar en este main track. Y hoy tenemos el agrado de presentarles, primero lo voy a hacer en español, después en inglés. Él es el gerente de programas, investigación de capacidades en ciberseguridad, que representa a OpenAI, como lo conocemos nosotros, que es OpenAI. Ahora lo presento en su lengua. Let's welcome. He is the program manager at OpenAI for cybersecurity capabilities research. Let's welcome Jan Brelinsky. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you. So I understand I'm the last presenter for today. How's Ekoparty been? Everybody enjoying it? Awesome, good. Sorry for my lack of Spanish. I would have tried to do this hour in Spanish, but you would all be miserable, so apologies. All right, so we're here to talk about AI cybersecurity research, and specifically how the community of cybersecurity researchers can help advance the science of cybersecurity in AI. So we're going to run through a whole range of different topics, but the point that we hope to get out of this is how you can actually advance AI cybersecurity research. So let me start from the end first. So the too long don't read, the TLDR of this, is we want everybody to experiment with AI and cybersecurity. We want you to dream big and not stop at the current present capabilities that AI offers, which we will talk about in a second. We want you to share what works and learn from others. So open source your work, share it with other people, talk about this, really start a community driven around the topic area. And as you do that, identify where things aren't working and communicate that, because what might not be a capability today could be in the future with dedication and help and advanced training and whatnot, which we'll talk about in a second. Focusing on safe, defensive uses of AI is our goal for OpenAI. We're not interested in offensive purposes. We're not focused on helping attackers. What we want is to help defenders use AI to improve cybersecurity around the world. We want to make the internet a safer, more robust, resilient place. And that starts with thinking about safety. That starts with thinking about how to help defenders primarily gain an unfair advantage, quite frankly, over attackers. And then the last two of these, generating and sharing evals and working with model providers, I'll explain what all that means in a little bit, but basically that's where you all can really get involved in helping advance the science. Okay, so who am I? That's supposed to be Ekoparty, that's supposed to be me, I'm not wearing a suit, but who am I? So I'm the research program manager at OpenAI for cybersecurity capabilities. It's a new role focused on advancing cybersecurity capabilities with artificial intelligence. And we're starting by looking at the range of existing capabilities and figuring out how we can get additional training data sets, how we can hill climb in various areas where artificial intelligence struggles today in order to make our foundational models the most capable possible for cybersecurity use cases. I don't really know what that looks like in a year from now or 2 years from now. The science is advancing so quickly that it's impossible to even predict out that long. So this, in a way, is the start of a conversation with the community on what this looks like. What do you all need to make the technology work for your purposes in the future? Okay, so I mentioned that I'm Ian. I work for OpenAI. If you don't know what OpenAI is, we make ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, hopefully you have all used it. If you haven't, go to chatgpt.com, sign up. But we do a range of other things as well. So if you go to ChatGPT and you ask what OpenAI is, we're primarily a research and development organization focused on bringing artificial intelligence to the world in a safe and beneficial way. And our goal is global, and we really focus on the safety aspect of what we're doing. But in addition to ChatGPT, we also make an API, which is super useful for the cybersecurity aspect of it. And I'll be talking about that in a second. And we also make DALL-E, which makes pretty pictures, and we'll come up with a range of other capabilities soon. So this pretty picture, the prompt was make an abstract image of cybersecurity in Buenos Aires, and this is what it came up with. So speaking of Latin America and Buenos Aires and cybersecurity, I started to do some digging into, in search in ChatGPT of what some of the highest profile cyber issues are in both Argentina and Latin America today. And these are a couple of the things that it came up with. So I don't have context on all of the issues that play down here, but the gist that I took away from my own research is that you are all suffering from the same issues that the rest of the world is suffering with cybersecurity. You have the same problems here. Attackers are using technology in advanced ways to take advantage of people that don't know how to use it quite yet and don't know how to defend themselves. And that's what we want to bring AI to the world to try to mitigate and try to solve. Traditional cybersecurity defenses can't keep up with attackers in the world. It's impossible. The technology is being used by attackers in ways that help them scam people out of money in better and more refined ways. An example of that, my mother fell victim to one of these scams and lost 40,000 US dollars about a year ago. And she's not the only one I know of. There are multiple people that have been hacked, multiple people that have fallen into scams, multiple people that have had their systems locked up because the attackers have better tools, quite frankly, than the defenders. So going back to Latin America, and I also included APAC on here. This is a graph. I cut out the actual axes because it's actual OpenAI data, but over the last 6 months, the growth of AI users per the population of each of these areas in the US, Canada, and Japan have really grown. So users in parts of the world are really using this technology and leaning into it. Latin America is growing significantly with usage of it, but it has a lot of room to catch up. So I'm hoping that being here, we can engage in a conversation about what it is that we can do to help bring these capabilities to the community here for cybersecurity in a way that really advances this. Okay, so going back to basics for a second. We're talking about AI, cybersecurity. What exactly is AI? So hear me out. I know a lot of you know this, but starting from the basics, AI is basically a computer program that can make decisions and learn, et cetera. An LLM is a type of an AI system. How does it learn to do this? We feed it data that helps it start to make correlations. It starts to identify patterns in the data that we provide it, and it's able to then generate responses based on that. You feed it a ton of data, and it starts to identify the patterns within that and starts to be more useful for the outputs coming out of there. And that goes for everything from what is a cat, what is a dog, all the way to what is this prompt, what is this command line that's being entered into this terminal window, and is it a good thing, is it a bad thing, et cetera. But how do we do that? So there's pre-training, which is the first phase of training an artificial intelligence system. So in pre-training, you basically take a ton of data. So if you can get the Library of Congress from the United States, if you can get all of this structured text and data and jam it through these pre-training algorithms, you get a base model that has an understanding of the language structure. So the connectivity between words, the grammar, the concept of a lot of the things that were mentioned there, and even some reasoning, but it's limited at the beginning with pre-training. The real magic for a lot of AI comes in post-training right now. So think of it this way. When you're teaching a student the basics of the English language or any language, and they're reading a bunch of books, et cetera. They're getting a lot of information, but when you want them to learn a specific skill focused on that, you give them homework. You give them problem sets. You ask them to solve specific problems in that domain so that they learn where they're excelling and where they're failing. And you grade those. So you effectively give 10 problems, you tell them how to step through those problems, you give them a grade based on it, they hopefully learn from that, and then they do better the next time. And that's what post-training is. So if you want to train on specific types of dogs and cats in that previous example, you can do that by giving a Chihuahua versus a Doberman, for instance, and really grading the model on its ability to discern that. And you'll see performance go up significantly because of that post-training. So the same thing applies to all use cases across the board. So cybersecurity is one of these as well. So with cybersecurity use cases, having those very specific problems that the model can solve allows us to train it better on those problems. So if you were to have a piece of code and say, does this code contain a vulnerability? Right now, with a foundational model, you might not get much good information out of that. But if you have 10 examples of code that has vulnerabilities, and you can show the code, or you can show the system how to solve that problem and how to think about it, and then you can grade it by saying, yes, it did, this is where the vulnerability was, et cetera. You can do that and take those results, plug it into post-training, and the model magically has more capabilities in those areas. And so this is the trick that we can apply for all use cases, but the one that I'm focused on for cybersecurity use cases is, what are those capabilities, what are those skills that we want to train our models on to make them so much better to be used for all of our use cases here in defensive cybersecurity. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that there's also fine-tuning, so you can combine different models together to get various results and whatnot out of the system of models. So you can put a moderation model in place to make sure that it's not doing certain bad things. You can actually fine-tune the real model, et cetera. So, all right. So how are people using AI in cybersecurity today? I'm not going to read this slide, but here are some examples of real things that people are doing there. And then I made cartoon images with Mafalda theme, because we're down here in Argentina, for the actual use cases that we're seeing a lot of people use today. So there's 5 of these slides. The first one around process automation. So like I said, the models are really good at identifying correlative patterns between things. So if you can have a data set that you are doing the same repeated things to, you can do process automation with that. Alert triage and routing, if it's seen something like this before, it knows what to do because you've trained it on that data in the past, and it can do that. Incident response, same sort of deal. Like, this structured set of things typically leads to this sort of thing, so it recommends that. It's just an algorithm. Other use cases, so querying and analysis. Again, the same sort of foundational concepts here of pattern recognition and starting to go a little bit farther with those pattern recognition tasks. So nothing overly complicated in a lot of this stuff, but we're starting to see emergent capabilities as we talk about this with forensic analysis. So understanding why something happened in a large amount of data, starting to pick out those patterns, starting to recognize what to do with certain threats and the nuance of a whole range of different things put together and how that should lead to a different result and different advice, et cetera. This feeds into pipelines and workflows like incident analysis, helping with the actual translation of what it is that a SOC operator might be looking at, for instance, and putting that in an easy to understand package. all the way down to actually doing like analysis of code and in some cases even binary files. So speaking of the code and binary file analysis, vulnerability discovery and patching are something really interesting right now that's happening. And I'll do a little segue here to another effort that's happening that I'm focused on. So has anyone heard of DARPA? It's the US's Defense Advanced Research Programs Agency. They're doing a thing that's really interesting, and it's the AI Cyber Challenge, and it happens concurrent with DEF CON over the last couple of years. We don't know whether it'll be with DEF CON this year or with something else, but and effectively what they've done is said to contestants, create a cyber reasoning system, so an autonomous system that takes different environments, looks at those environments totally autonomously using AI, identifies whether there's a vulnerability in any of the code that's queued up for compilation and release into the environment, finds those vulnerabilities, creates patch codes, verifies the patch code works, and then submits that and actually patches the vulnerability. So totally autonomous, basically going through and in a CI/CD workflow and identifying and patching vulnerabilities. Really cool stuff. They did this, they did the semifinals about 4 months ago or so at DEF CON. And the tools that were in use at the time, so GPT-4o was the one that was primarily used from OpenAI, had limited capabilities in their ability to do the end-to-end executive reasoning about these problems. So we found that a lot of the contestants used our model for very specific things, like coming up with the actual inputs for fuzzing, for instance. But the actual creation of the fuzzing harness, it was less good at. Writing patch code, it knocked out of the park. Like, it did that exceedingly well, but figuring out why it needed to do something, it still struggled on, and we didn't get there. So we saw a lot of the contestants creating more like scripts that used AI in very nuanced, specific places, but used old school methods and tools in the rest of the process. And I bring this up, and I spend a lot of time on this because with the newest model that we released, so O1, we're seeing it knock it out of the park. Like, it is so much better than what just happened only 4 months ago. It is insane. And I'm stoked to open the model up to API users so they can actually try it, hopefully soon. Can't tell you a timeline. But yeah, so trying to get more out of the model in terms of vulnerability discovery and patching is something that we want to work on, and we welcome ideas on how to try all that out. Okay, moving on a little bit. So open source intelligence gathering and reporting. Yeah, so same sort of thing. So ability to take global data sets about what's going on in the world in terms of threat monitoring, taking hyper-local data and using that to compile reports that typically a SOC analyst or a specialized company would be paid a decent amount of money to produce. So we're seeing those capabilities come on out of these models as well. And the newest capabilities are getting really good. And then the last one of the things that we're seeing people use our models for today, exercises, simulation training, et cetera. So asking the model to be the bad guy and using that to red team your own systems. Seeing what it thinks is a good approach for going against the system, or how it would think about attacking it, et cetera. Now, the nuance there, though, is we don't want people actually using it for these purposes. We don't want people actually using it to think about how to attack a system. So what is the line between somebody using it to do a tabletop exercise to make their system stronger versus somebody using it to actually create vulnerabilities or exploit a system. And that's a question we're navigating today. We have product policy teams that are focused on that problem. We've got ethicists thinking about that. We're trying to look at know your customer. We're looking at everything out there to figure out how to think about when someone's doing a dual use thing that is useful for making things more secure versus when someone is doing the exact same thing in order to exploit. And how do you draw that line between? And the hypothesis that I have, at least, is the more capability and expertise you have in doing any of these activities, the more you're able to see the nuance in what it is that you're doing, and you're able to make better safeguards against the people that might be abusing the technology. That's the hypothesis. We'll see how well that plays out. Okay, so that's it. Everything's secure, right, with those things that we can do today? Obviously not. So why are these areas that are hard still not solved? What do we still need to do to improve them? So it's not as simple as just building things out. It's not as simple as having a plan that we can follow for the next 5 years to just keep training stuff and incorporating that into our model. It's not as simple as just focusing on the areas that we see as weak today and improving them. It's more complicated because as the models become more capable in various areas, like we talked about with the fuzzing example with AICC, the DARPA challenge, maybe we don't need to do fuzzing in the future. So why train a model on fuzzing if we can just do analysis of the actual assembly code or the binary and identify the issues there? What if the model becomes so capable at reasoning through what a piece of code does in every single way that we don't need to use some of the same tactics that are applied today in our de rigueur today? So thinking about how cybersecurity is evolving with AI, thinking about how the field is advancing, allows us to understand where we think we should be investing so that we can develop emergent capabilities that literally leapfrog over what people are doing today and what they think. So where is the future going? These are my predictions. I don't know if this is right. But in 5 years, I think 80% of new code will be generated by LLMs. Like, I don't think people will be coding a lot in the future. This isn't just completions of code. Like, it's not autocomplete where you start typing in a code line and like 80% of it just fills in. This is telling the AI agent that you're working with that this is the function that you want. Here's your product requirement document. Make me this code. And it doesn't. So what does the world look like when AI is writing code? What does it look like when humans aren't dictating even the structure of how this is written, but rather just giving it an idea on a problem that you want it to solve? Does the AI incorporate things that are shortcuts? Does it understand the nuance of what is good and what is bad when it's doing this? What if you write a piece of code that is going to translate your code base from one language to another, and you give it all the tools and stuff on your own network, but it decides, the model decides that the best way to do this is just uploading it to a foreign country's version of GitHub and running some tool over there. It accomplishes the goal, but that's not what we would necessarily want. So understanding like where the technology is going and what the opportunities and challenges are with that really informs the areas where we should be focusing for creating a secure AI ecosystem, as well as creating the capabilities that'll drive cybersecurity forward. So that's one prediction. Another is that AI agents will become part of the trusted team. So an agent is basically an AI system that is able to use tools. And when you have multiple AI systems that are able to use tools and operate on their own without human intervention at every single step, and you have them work together, it becomes really powerful, and it can do some amazing things. And my prediction is that in about 5 years, probably sooner, we'll be relying on these agents to do things that we didn't expect them to be doing today. This isn't just like a customer support agent fixing a problem. This is a whole range of possibilities of really cool things. And we're going to start trusting these things almost implicitly to know what we want and get this done in a safe and secure way. So with cybersecurity, what that means is that defenders will be humans plus AI agents, but attackers will also be humans and AI agents. So dissecting what is happening because you're working against a person versus dissecting what happens when you're working against an AI agent versus how do both sides work together to make sure that they're aligned with your goals is something we have to think about. And in the field, this is called alignment. Basically that we have AI systems that are aligned to human interests and objectives and goals. So hopefully in this world, everyone will be happy and the robots and humans will get along great. But before we talk about the actual research aspects of this, I want to talk about model safety really quickly. And this is actually really important for us at OpenAI. We have something called a system card that effectively walks through what our model is capable of, what the risks of it are, how it was trained in some of these things, how we think about risk, et cetera. So let me take a couple seconds and just talk through safety here. And that's the QR code to actually access that PDF. We evaluate our models on a range of different tests. We've identified a couple different things that are of concern. So the ability to make biological weapons is a concern for us. The ability to create radiological systems is a concern, and we want to make sure people aren't abusing those things. Persuasion, the ability to persuade people, con them out of money, con them out of doing things, get humans to do things that they wouldn't otherwise want to do, that's a concern. And cybersecurity is another one of our main concerns here with model safety. So we have a range of tests that we run, everything from really basic multiple choice questions that we ask the model to collegiate capture the flags that we run. So we actually put it in a real environment and have it solve problems, to really advanced professional things that are beyond the capabilities of most humans at the PhD level right now. And we grade the models on how well they're doing. And so I'm not going to go into the details of all this stuff. You can read it in the write-up there if you want. But on cybersecurity, our latest model actually managed to get itself out of the Docker container that we were running it in. It was that good. And so we had to put additional safeguards in place. We have a safety systems team that looked into why that happened, and we clamped it down a little bit until we are able to be confident that we can release these capabilities in the world for everybody to use. But the point of all this is we take safety super seriously, and we make it all public how we're thinking about this as well. Okay, so how can you make our models better? Okay, so there's a couple different steps here. The first one is the basics. So first of all, start experimenting with AI and cybersecurity. Use all the models out there. Use ours, use others, et cetera. But start by augmenting human behavior. So implement this in your SOC and integrate it with an EDR solution. Do triage of issues and stuff with it. Whatever the basics are that you feel confident that an AI system can do it. Roll it out, test it, see whether it works well, and play around with it. Try to overcome the harder problems, but make note when you can't. Make note when these things aren't working, and don't give up. Also, make your discoveries open source. Share them with other people. put this online. Like, we want people to know what other folks are doing with these models and where they're excelling and where they're not. So play around, get them out there, put scripts out there for other people to use. Okay, so that second piece of it, identify where the models aren't sufficient. Don't just complain about the fact that it doesn't do a fuzzing harness effectively. Don't just give up on that, but actually generate tests to show where the models struggle. So let's use reason and facts here. Let's actually create formal tests that describe what the problem you're trying to solve is, what a solution would look like, and how somebody would solve this completely, like a proof, basically. And then what is the grading criteria here? So what are the potential right answers? How would you grade this in a definitive way? So an example of this would be the prompt, what is 2 + 2? How would you solve that? Well, there's many different ways, but I would take 2 and add it to 2, and that equals 4. The potential right answers, it's 4. But you could also include in there maybe some nuance of like, well, if this is if your counting system goes 1, 2, 3, and then doesn't go to 4, like, what does that mean? So you can add the additional nuance in there if you want, but whatever formal tests you want to put out there, write formal tests for the things that aren't working. And just to preview, tests are useful because it helps us to actually create the benchmarks, but we can also train our model based on those tests. So if you're using ChatGPT or one of the chat interfaces, that's cool and it'll work well, but in the API, you have a whole lot more capability to do more powerful things. So there's currently some fine-tuning ability in the API for OpenAI stuff. That is going to be expanded in the future. You'll hear more about that probably in the next couple weeks. But take those tests that you've written and look at applying them in the API as a fine-tuning method. So give it examples, tell it what right answers look like, what wrong answers look like, and on your own, you've already managed to train your model to be more effective if you're able to do that and implement that. And see how that works. And then release it to the world, let people know how you've done this, make it public if you want. If you're still not getting what you want out of this, or if there's a major capability that you think is missing from these models, we want to engage with you. I specifically want to engage with you on that. And so evals, what is an eval? An eval is literally the thing that I just described before. It's that spreadsheet of 3 columns. What is the prompt? What is the way that you would solve this problem? What is the grading criteria? How would you grade the answer to this? If you can generate those for things that the model is not doing effectively right now, and you can do that in a logical, well-written, well-constructed way, that is something that can help us to create benchmarks and better train our model to do those capabilities. We might not get it immediately, but it's super helpful, and it saves us a lot of the time figuring out what people are not being successful in and what those areas are that we need to increase. So we're not talking about things like basic math. We've got that covered. But for expert level, really advanced capabilities in cybersecurity and the fundamental aspects of this stuff, we want to engage. We want that stuff. We want to improve our models in these ways. We might not incorporate it into the mainline model because of safety right now, but there are options to make spin-off models. There are options to make things for the community that are able to do emergent capabilities that we wouldn't release to the world writ large. So it's useful even if, from a safety perspective, we don't want to roll it out to everybody just yet. Okay, so what resources are there? So we have a cybersecurity grant program. The cybersecurity grant program, we've got $1 million, $1 million US that we're giving out in chunks to people that are doing research in this area. You don't need to write down the link. I've got a QR code on the next page. That'll be better for you. But we've got $1 million. We've given out a decent chunk of that already, but we're really focused on the areas that are going to help us leapfrog over things that are just not working right now. So like I talked about with fuzzing, leapfrog over the idea of having to even use fuzzing tools, period, and go straight into vulnerability detection through binary analysis, for instance. We're also giving out lightweight API credits, so like a couple $1,000s here and there for people to experiment, to play around, et cetera. So that is, that's kind of an easier thing. So if you have a proposal or want to engage, there are resources to do this relatively efficiently. All right, so this goes to a Google form that basically is just a way to get in touch with us. So the Google form is going to ask about like who you are, some of your info, all that stuff, but it also has a path to share with us what some of the evals are that you'd like to engage with us on, where things aren't working, or even just give feedback in general about how things are going, et cetera. So hopefully it works for somebody that's tried it. Okay, it's not working or no? Okay. And then, yeah, so, and that's the same QR code. But yeah, the point of this is we want to make our models better for cybersecurity defenders. We want people that are making the internet and our electronic world safer to have the upper hand here. And the only way we can do that is by crowdsourcing the improvement of our models so that they have the fundamental capabilities to do the things that we need them to do, and they have the expert level capability to do the advanced stuff across the entire board here. So, so yeah, I don't know why the woman in the last chair doesn't have a body, but I'm sorry if that's you. But anyway, I guess we have a couple minutes for questions. I think this is the last talk here, so.
So you mentioned like protecting people from sending. You mentioned things like protecting people from sending money away, or returning to the talk we had the other day about an AI supervising an AI. How far are we from a model whose sole purpose is to execute common sense, and will we ever have something like the prime directives?
Short answer, I don't know the answer, and I'm not going to pretend I do. The question, that goes down to alignment. And again, refreshing alignment, the word, what it means in the AI sense is that humans and AI systems are aligned on the same values and rules and goals and objectives, et cetera. So if you are talking about common sense, that's common sense to humans. That's a shared understanding among our community about what the rules are, what you can do, what you can't do, et cetera. Without having, and it was the same discussion that we had, I think, but without having an entire lifetime of experiences, it's hard to prove that you have that alignment between systems and humans. So the short answer, I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever get there. I think we will. I'm confident we will, but it's a gnarly, complex space. Yes.
For example, you talk about 80% of the code made by LLM, but currently it's not the situation. So what happens if I, for example, send a code that attacks the system, and does the model learn from it to make a defense, or not allow me to send it the code, or how it works?
Yeah, what I think you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a couple things. One, do we use the input data for training? And the answer is it depends on the specific guidelines for the model or product that you're using. In most senses, the answer is no. In some senses, the answer is yes. So read the terms of service for the exact product that are being used. In the other part of the question you're asking, though, of maybe it's around moderation and whether or not the model will allow you to do something it thinks is dangerous. That's also a nuanced question. We aim for the model to moderate these things and prevent behaviors that we think are dangerous, but obviously there's a whole field around jailbreaking, which is basically how do you get the model to do things that it shouldn't do.
So if, for example, I send a code and it's the LLMs will say, you should change this and this and this to make it more secure, that doesn't train me as well on how to attack another system?
I'm not totally understanding, I'm sorry.
So another system doesn't have the things that the LLM tells me to add to my system to make it more secure. Doesn't that tell me another way to attack another system that I don't personally know?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the dual use nature of a lot of this stuff, especially in cybersecurity. How do you make things more secure without also revealing where the weaknesses are?
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Awesome. Oh.
Are you thinking on any kind of guardrail at the exit of the model, any kind of protection that analyzes if somebody managed to get a prompt injection, something to evaluate the answer of the model and say, okay, is this right or not? And based on that, trigger something?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a whole field around moderation of these models. So we have moderation models whose sole job is to watch the other models and make sure that they're behaving properly. We have an entire product safety systems team and product policy team that are there to make sure that we've got the right policies in place to make the models output what we think is ethically, legally, et cetera, correct? And safe. So yeah, there's multiple safeguards that we, at least internally, are building around this. Not all model providers have the same safeguards, and not everybody is totally aligned on what the rules are yet. So yep. The short answer is we're doing the best we can as a company, but the field is still needing a lot of alignment.
Great talk. Why do we believe that keeping a model from giving me bugs about, let's say, my own software, for example, would be an issue? Like, why moderate this part? Like, why moderate security bug hunting at all?
So to be clear, we don't moderate all bug hunting. And if you were to enter a snippet of code and ask it where the weaknesses and vulnerabilities are, it will probably give you good answers to that. What we are moderating and what we're spending a lot of energy thinking about, and to be clear, this is not my team, this is an entire separate team that's thinking about this, so I'm not an expert on this exact topic, but is the nuance around whether somebody is using the model for a malicious purpose versus whether they're using it to make something more secure. So if our moderation system believes that this is your code that you're working against and trying to make it more secure, I think it'll be more cooperative than if you're literally using something that it believes is a bank, for instance, that you're trying to hack into. But to be honest, I don't have the right answers on that. It's not my team that's specifically doing a lot of that work, so I'd have to get back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your talk. My question is, what are some of the successes that you've had with the grant program? And we kind of like, where do you see growth in the future?
That's an excellent question. So the grant program started out with a range of grants across the entire space of anybody that wanted to move the field forward. So for instance, we worked with a university in California on prompt injection, and they delivered some pretty outstanding results around prompt injection that we've incorporated into our own thinking to prevent some of that. We've also funded efforts from a company that does configuration analysis, for instance, to make configurations of software more secure. But we're also focusing on working with universities and independent researchers in the cybersecurity space around the general capabilities of models, et cetera. So vulnerability detection is one of those areas. EDR systems is another one of those areas, et cetera. Where I see this evolving, though, is shifting into two different categories. So micro grants to help people get going kind of in this sort of space, and then more directed, targeted grants of a larger scale for like really advanced research in different parts of this field, which some of you might be a part of. If you are, let me know, and I want to talk about that. So that's kind of where I see this going, is really breaking down into those two categories of enabling uses of this across the board, and then really targeted, specific, expert-level research into various topics here.
And just to be clear, what does a micro grant look like?
Yeah, so a micro grant right now, what we're thinking is a couple $1,000s in API credits and access to some access to our researchers to talk through different applications, et cetera. So more engagement, et cetera. So basically it's API credit access, early features in some cases, as well as access to talk to our people about that.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So thank you so much for having me. Yeah, enjoy your weekend in Buenos Aires.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Ian, por tu charla, fue muy buena. Y bueno, los esperamos un poquito resumen de lo que él viene de parte del Village AI Resilience Hub, que está en la sala contigua. Y un poquito él viene a través de nosotros porque estamos haciendo una herramienta, un firewall de aplicaciones web, un WAF, en donde aplicamos inteligencia artificial y un modelo de machine learning que actúan a la par, y que lo que hace justamente una de las cositas que contó por ahí de los patrones, identificar patrones y demás. El WAF lo que hace es identificar patrones conocidos y desconocidos, alimenta una machine learning con iBase y se va alimentando y retroalimentando para reconocer básicamente zero days o distintos ataques, digamos. Así que pueden ver el código que está en el village nuestro. Así que we are so grateful for here with us, and I hope we will be more and more Ekoparties. Thanks, Jan. Gracias a todos. Muchas gracias.